What's going on, guys? Hunter here with AM Electronics. You asked for it, we're here to deliver. We've got a new firmware update for the Infinity 5 and 7 ECUs, version 96.5. Question everybody's been asking is, when are you going to support the PDU-8? And the answer is right now. With the new firmware, version 96.5, you now have control of the PDU-8. The PDU-8 gives you 4 outputs at 20 amps, 4 outputs at 10 amps, and you can control things like AC compressor, nitrous solenoid, coolant fans, fuel pumps, number of other different things. Active arrow, headlights, tail lights, why not? Go for it. If you want to clean up your wiring and save weight, run a PDU-8. It's small, compact, and you can put the power exactly where you need it. Not really much bigger than a standard credit card, so you can put the power pretty much anywhere. Great thing about the PDU-8 is it can be strategically placed around the vehicle, whether that be in the engine bay or in the cabin, so you can have the power go into the items you're controlling and eliminate some wiring along the way. All of this control can be yours for around 700 bucks. Just as impressive as the hardware component of the PDU-8 is the software integration we've done in the InfinityTuner software. So let's dive right into the new update and check out the features. If you open up the wizards and then go to the Setup Wizard, down in the outputs, you'll see the PDU-8 CAN output option. With the PDU-8 in the software, you can see that channels 1 through 4, those are for your simple on-off functions. Those are great for your fuel pumps, coolant fans, AC compressor, nitrous solenoid, and a couple other things. Outputs 5 through 8 you can use for pretty much anything. You'll have control via 5x5 table where you can select the duty cycle X and Y axis to command a given output to come on exactly when you need it to. The next notable improvement that's been made is an increase to the map and fuel pressure sampling rate. We've increased this by 10 times, allowing the tuner to increase the map smoothing factor without sacrificing response, leading to a more consistent and precise sensor signals, and in the end, you end up with a better tune. The next feature to discuss is an improvement to the closed-loop boost feedback in the Infinity ECU. Version 96.5 brings in a new feature that allows you to disable boost feedback until you're within a certain range from target. This prevents overshoot during spool up and allows the user to hit the exact target they need. The next notable improvement is an addition to the Lambda feedback gain x-axis, which allows you to select mass airflow instead of engine speed, and this allows you a more dynamic control of your Lambda feedback as airflow changes at a given RPM. On top of everything else, we've added some improvements to the way the Infinity ECU handles the cam and crank sensors as they come in, and added some additional diagnostic channels that allow you to see if the cam sensor missed a tooth or picked up an extra tooth, and same on the crank. They're all covered in the 96.5 setup notes, and you'll be able to see specifically what's going on with your sensor. If you're having a problem, and if that problem is coming from the cam or the crank sensor, then you can go from there in diagnosing what might be the issue. Keep in mind, bad wiring is always going to cause additional problems in the way the ECU picks up the signals, so make sure your wiring's good from your sensor to your ECU. Now that we've gone over all the new features, we're going to show you how to flash it to the ECU. Step 1 is going to be downloading the InfinityTuner software. The new firmware requires some new files to allow everything to work, so you want to make sure you update the InfinityTuner software first, link in the description below. Then you're going to want to go to aeminfinity.com and download the latest firmware file for your ECU. Keep in mind, the firmware files are unique to each serial number, so you'll want to download the right one for your ECU. Now, you'll want to make sure that that file, when you download it, is in one of a couple different places. You want it to either be in your downloads folder or on your desktop. Those are the two locations that your InfinityTuner software will be looking for it. Now that we have the firmware file all downloaded, let's go over to the car and flash it in. One thing that I want to stress, you don't want your computer to die or run out of battery or the cord to get kicked out during the update process, or the ECU could end up in a bad state. So make sure your laptop is plugged in and you're ready to go. Once you're in the car, you're going to want to turn on ignition power, take your USB, connect to the ECU, and you'll see the ECU connect and be open. You know you're connected when the top of the software shows green USB, and then it also showed the model of ECU you have. In this case, we're working with an Infinity Series 5. From there, you'll go to ECU, upgrade firmware. At this point, the software will give you a warning saying that the ECU will stop running and the models will not function. This basically means that the coils and injectors are not going to be working during the time that the firmware is updating, so don't do this when you're trying to start the car. So go ahead and press continue. From there, the ECU is going to search your computer and find the appropriate file so you can update the firmware on that ECU. In this case, the software found the file that I downloaded from Infinity.com, so we can select that. Now you'll also notice a checkbox at the bottom that says keep calibration data. You'll want to click this checkbox because that'll allow the ECU during the firmware update process to also convert your calibration to the latest version, so you don't need any fussing about. Calibration will already be there in your ECU, ready to go, converted to the new firmware. So we'll go ahead and press begin. During this process, you'll see the ECU go and start step 1 of 1. At about halfway through, you'll see the firmware prompt you to key off ignition and then key back on. You want to key off your ignition so that the main relay turns off. You'll go ahead and key off, wait for the click from the main relay, and then key back on so that the second half of the firmware update can complete. It says update 1 of 2 complete successful, switch ECU off. So we'll go ahead right here, switch the ECU off, count to about 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back on. Reconnects and starts the second half of the process, which includes converting your calibration file. Now at this point, about 5 minutes have elapsed. You see the message on screen say upgrade 2 of 2 complete, validation successful, safe to close window. You can go ahead and press the X on the corner. We'll go ahead and key off the ignition. Then we'll go ahead and key back on, unplug, re-plug back in, connect to the ECU, and we can open up the Setup Wizard and start playing with some of our new features. So let's see. Up at the top, we see Infinity 506, 96.5. We have all of our basic setup here, advanced setup here, new options. Scroll down, we have our new PDU 8 control here, as well as the other features we just went over. On this car, we've already validated the PDU 8 on it, and we've installed it to run the fuel pump as well as one of the coolant fans, just to test a couple of the different outputs on it. Now, if you're just upgrading the firmware on your ECU for the first time, you may encounter when you first connect to it that the ECU says unknown board at the top. On a fresh installation, this is completely normal because the ECU doesn't have any firmware on it yet. So go ahead, connect to the ECU normally, and run through the firmware upgrade process. Now, during the firmware upgrade, you may see it stop at step 1 of 2 complete, safe to close window. Go ahead, cycle off ignition power when it says safe to close window, reconnect to the ECU, and confirm that you can import your calibration file. If you run into a problem importing your calibration file, go ahead and double check that the flash enable jumper is not connected. When the flash enable jumper is connected, your ECU will always say unknown board, because the ECU is then in a state where it wants to accept firmware in the event that there was a problem previously. If you had a problem previously and needed to use the flash enable jumper to upgrade your firmware, go ahead, disconnect that flash enable jumper, attempt to connect to the USB normally, and then go ahead and do the upgrade again on the firmware, just so that the second half and the peripheral control can be completed. Once the firmware update goes through again and that step 2 of 2 is complete, you'll be able to cycle ignition power on and off, connect to it, and load your new calibration file. One thing to note is that under most circumstances, the flash enable jumper isn't needed to upgrade your firmware. Alright, so that's a wrap. We went over the new features in 96.5 and how to update your firmware. If you want a full overview of what's included in the 96.5 update, we have a link in the description below to the full PDF. Go ahead and check it out. If you like what you saw here, go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe, and press the bell so you can be first in line for the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.